At this time, I will call to order the Board of Adjustments and Appeals meeting for June 29th, 2022. I would ask that you please rise and join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Except roll call. May we have a roll call, please?
Chairman Taylor?
Here.
Vice Chairman Smith Rodriguez?
Here.
Member Beckles?
Here.
Member Wheelis?
Here.
Alternate Member Van Zyl de Jong?
Here.
All right, we have a full quorum, so we have enough for meeting tonight. First order of business is approval of the minutes from the 2027, April 27th, 2022 meeting. Did anybody notice any corrections or additions that need to be made to the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
A second motion.
All those in favor, please affirm by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. All right, thank you. Okay, time to read the little thing. Have a little notice to read now. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located at a table near the entrance to the council chamber, or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with procedures adopted in Resolution 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first. Those opposed will be heard second. And those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative for either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. So, if you plan to speak tonight, you should have filled out a little card over there and brought it to the secretary, right? I see one. Yeah, go ahead and turn it in, sir. Yeah, turn it in to the recording secretary. Have you filled out one yet?
If you're applicant, you have to.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, staff, have the three items on tonight's agenda been properly advertised?
Yes.
Very good. Members present, have anybody visited a site or spoken to members of the public regarding an item?
No.
No.
I visit one of the sites because I drive by it about 4 times a day. But other than that, I've not spoken to anybody in the public. So we'll move on. We have nothing on the consent agenda or old business. And so we'll move right to our first application, which is number 14-2022, 4655 South Street. Okay, staff, please.
So variance number 14-2022 really starts on page 8 of your packet, but I'm going to jump straight to the staff report, which begins on page 10 of your packet, and briefly go through that. The applicant, Jennifer Wolf, is requesting a variance to Land Development Regulations Section 32-10A, wall sign regulations to increase the quantity and square footage from 1 wall sign to allow for 3 wall signs. The location of the property is at 4655 South Street. The future land use on the property is commercial high intensity. The zoning is commercial, community commercial, and the surrounding zoning to the north is industrial, to south and east is commercial, and west of it, across the street, South Street, is regional commercial. Beginning on page 11 of your packet, which is the second page of the staff report. The lot is rectangular in shape with frontage on an arterial, which is South Street. The current use is retail, a tire store, and garages, which is consistent with the community commercial zoning district. I'll briefly summarize the criteria that you will consider or use as part of each variance request, whether to approve or deny. I'll do this once. I won't do that for the subsequent applications. So in order to authorize any variance to the provisions of such ordinance, the board must consider the following criteria: special conditions and circumstances which exist or are peculiar to the property, its structure, or building involved, which are not applicable to other land, structures, or buildings in the same zoning. Special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. Granting the variance requested will not confer upon the applicant any special privilege that's denied by others. The literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by others. The variance granted is the minimum variance necessary. The granting of the variance will preserve the spirit of the ordinance and remain in harmony with its general purpose and intent. In granting the variance, the public safety and welfare must be assured. In no case shall the granting of a variance result in a change of use, which would not be permitted in that zoning. So further down on that same page, page 11, which is page of your packet, page 2 of the staff report, I'll briefly go through the analysis. The applicant is requesting a variance to section 32-10, wall sign regulations, to increase the quantity of wall signs on a commercial building from 1 to 3. The primary facade of the structure faces South Street, State Road 405, which is an arterial road. Garage doors are located on the south face of the building. The north side of the building faces unimproved vacant land. So that's the rear of the building, basically, on the north side. The applicant is requesting one wall sign each for the north, west, and south building sides. Page 12 of your packet, which is page 3 of the staff report. In 2018, a site plan was approved to allow for the construction of a gas station with convenience store, dental office, and a subject commercial building with shared parking, driveways, and stormwater infrastructure. I'll show you an image of what that looks like in a moment. In 2021, a non-residential minor division permit was approved to allow for the division of land consistent with the said site plan. The minor division permit process, according to the city's code, is basically just allowing for someone to be able to subdivide a commercial piece of property into out parcels as part of a site plan, consistent with that site plan. I'll show you an image of what that looks like in a moment. Currently, a site plan and building permit are under construction for this subject site. Section 3210A of the code states, and I paraphrased here in the staff report, each separately licensed business shall be allowed one wall sign. Buildings having more than one street frontage may have one additional wall sign. The parcel has frontage adjacent to South Street, State Road 405, and shares driveways with the Cumberland Farms convenience store and a dental office building. The commercial building is entitled to one wall sign facing South Street. There does not appear to be a hardship related to the parcel or the building to justify the variance for the additional 2 wall signs. The parcel does not have a second street frontage, and an existing shared ground sign that is located at the South Street entrance of this development can accommodate the advertising needs of the commercial businesses at this location. So based on that information, staff recommends denial of the variance to allow more than one wall sign on this single tenant building located at 4655 South Street, the Discount Tire Building. There are no special conditions or circumstances that are peculiar to the property. Granting a variance would confer upon the applicant a privilege denied by others. The literal interpretation of the code would not deprive the applicant rights commonly enjoyed by others, and the variance is not the minimum necessary. So with that, I'm going to refer you to page 26 of your packet. I won't go through everything on this packet. On page 26, you'll see an illustration that was submitted to us by the applicant. You'll see the building elevations. There's a west elevation at the top of that page, and that is the elevation that will face South Street. In the middle of the page, you'll see what's labeled there as north elevation. That is the elevation that will face or be on the rear of the building, facing the unimproved vacant piece of property to the north. And at the bottom of that same page, you will see the south elevation, and that will face internal to the site. And you can also see the garages on that facade of the building. With that, then, I'm going to also send you to page 36 of your packet. And I'm just referring you to an aerial that we've clipped from the property appraiser's website. You can see the subject parcel is outlined there in red. That was created, the parcel was created as part of that minor division process, which I mentioned earlier, that included the Cumberland Farms development immediately to the south. And there's also a dental office that is part of parcel immediately to the east. All of that was approved as one giant site plan, and then there was a minor division process approved to allow that site, those parcels to be created per that site plan. So this development does share cross-access driveways in and out. But this particular subject parcel only faces South Street. So with that, we, based on this analysis, we were not able to support or find a reason to support the request for the additional 2 wall signs. With that, I'll try to answer any questions you have about this, and I believe the applicant may be here to answer any questions too.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Section 32-10, I'm trying to read it again quickly now. Is the signage required to be on the right-of-way? I know that if there's a second right-of-way, it's required to be on that second right-of-way. But is the first sign required to be on the right-of-way?
So I'm going to refer to you to page 14 of your packet. I believe that's what you're looking at. Okay. So you see paragraph A2, buildings having more than one street frontage on an existing paved right-of-way may have one additional wall sign affixed to that second right-of-way frontage. That would apply to a corner lot. And so it would have 2 frontages, and so that second, they would be entitled to have that second sign, and yes, facing that right-of-way.
Well, I understand that, but does this code require that the one sign on the one right-of-way actually be on the right-of-way?
Should face that particular right-of-way, yes, ma'am.
That's not expressly written in here. I
We've
see that
looked
it's
at-
implied.
Right, because it does ask for, if you're entitled to have a second wall sign, it should face a right-of-way, so it implies that the first wall sign should do the same.
Okay, thanks.
Are there other questions of staff? Okay, I'll wait, and we'll at this time, then open up for a public hearing. Do we have anyone submitted a card?
Jennifer Wolf.
All right, thank you. Ms. Wolf, you come up, please, state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Chairman Taylor and board members. For the record, my name is Jennifer Wolf, and our address is 4113 North Swan Street, Covington, Georgia, 30014. I am here today on behalf of Discount Tire and Walton Signage, which is the manufacturing company for Discount Tire signs. I am here to humbly request the Board of Appeals approval to allow additional wall signs to be placed on the side elevations of the Discount Tire store located at 4655 South Street, Titusville. This project is zoned community commercial. The parcel size is 3/4 of an acre, about 43,380 square feet. The building size is 7,470 square feet. We thank the City of Titusville for their acceptance and review of our variance application. We are aware the city does not encourage or support the proposed signage for Discount Tire for the mere purposes that it would be unfair to other business owners or would encourage others to seek variances for the same or similar allowances. Although we don't understand staff's denial, we do realize that the end goal may be to reduce signage clutter within the City of Titusville, and that I can understand. The purpose and intent for the Zoning Board of Appeals, however, is to prove that there are circumstances when considerations for zoning relief are applicable and can be applied for through this process. The ZBA process is not isolated to just one business owner, but to all business owners who can prove to the board that there are fair and just reasons why relief can be given when and where applicable. The key factors in our request for relief of this sign ordinance are as follows. The proposed signage protects the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens and others within the county. The proposed signage reduces traffic hazards, pedestrian hazards, and other hazards. The proposed signage promotes and maintains the aesthetic qualities of the county. The proposed signage promotes economic development. Lastly, balances the rights of persons to convey their message through signs and the rights of the public to be protected against visual obstacles. We would like the board to understand that a little interpretation of the provisions in this sign ordinance will deprive the tenant owner of the rights commonly enjoyed by others as well. Enjoyed by others as well. Signs provide an important medium through which individuals may convey a message to the public. The proposed requested variance is compatible with other businesses located within surrounding counties, communities, and developments. The signage copy size are not offensive or obsessive, but rather aesthetically pleasing, well-formed, and balanced to the store elevation and neighboring businesses. Discount Tire, like many business owners, brings so much added value to the city of Titusville. Their investment in the community is your investment. Again, we humbly ask the board to please consider the allowances being requested today with the need to identify the elevations visible to the public. If the board is adamant about not approving or seeing the need for both elevations to be identified, then we ask for consideration for the side elevation closest to Cheney Highway. We thank you in advance for consideration of our request this evening. I do have one document to share, and as I was listening to the staff report, it seems like there might be a little bit of conflict of information, so I just want to set the record straight. Our parcel is subdivided into 4 businesses. However, the records that we received from Brevard County and the records that we have from Walton Signage and Discount Tire shows that this building, which is 2, which is where Discount Tire is, has a elevation that faces South Street, but also intersects with Cheney Highway, according to this map that was provided by your county offices. So from our standpoint, we feel that it's vital to have identification on Cheney Highway, and Foley would be grand as well, just because there is opportunities to see that business from that intersection. Again, we thank you for your consideration. If you'd like to have this map or look at it, I'd be more than happy to give it to you. But I just want to say thank you.
Questions, sir? Yes, go ahead. I'll have it. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a little cut-through road that everybody. Just to clarify, so there's no street sign or pole sign or anything that will be in front of your business on South Street. Is that correct? I just see the signs on the building. I don't see anything about a sign being on the road.
There is an image that was included in page 37 of your packet
37.
that I snipped from Google Street Maps. And it does show a pole sign there.
So, Ms. Wolf, if I'm understanding your last argument, which caused me to have to pull up Google Maps, your argument is that the parcel itself that you sit on is adjacent to Foley and Cheney, although the structure would not be immediately attached to either of those streets. Is that a fair statement?
No, ma'am. The structure is located on South Street and Cheney Highway, according to the documentation that I've been provided from the county.
What about according to real life? Doesn't Cumberland Farms sit in front of Discount Tire, that spot, directly on Cheney?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know. I'm not familiar with this property.
Okay.
I mean, I did a viewing, a field survey today, a visual survey of Discount Tires. I was not looking at the other businesses that are within the area. My focus was just on Discount. So I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so you're showing okay, so it's a multiple pole sign that it has all 3 of the businesses on it, is what you're saying, right?
Correct. I don't know, Ms. Wolf, you can take a look what we included. This is an image that shows the ground sign. That's the pole sign, the building, the subject building. This is Cumberland Farms right over here. According to your drawing that you submitted on page 24 of your packet, you'll see this is Cumberland Farms just down here. So the pole sign is facing this street.
Okay. I'm not questioning whether the pole sign's there, more just the location of
The building?
the building as it relates to Cheney. So
Okay.
Walton Signage, when they did their code check, They were under the impression that they could have a sign on the west elevation, which is South Street, which is where the curb sign is.
We can't hear you. We're
I'm sorry.
recorded.
When Walton Signage did their code check for signage allowances, it was understood that they would be able to have a sign on the west elevation, which faces South Street, and then the south elevation, which is at an angle because of the shape of the building, but it faces Cheney Highway. Majority of that elevation does face Cheney, and that's what they're really seeking for. There is a benefit to having a sign on Foley Street, but if they, needed to compromise or have a concession, I guess you could say, for lack of better words, they would ultimately be happy with having an additional sign on Cheney because they feel that there's a benefit there.
Well, I guess this is a staff question, but looking at that page 25 that we have, you have A, B, C, D, E, F. There's two things at each sign.
That's correct. So, yeah, I can see the confusion on the faces of the board. I would go back to page 24 of the packet, because that kind of, there's a bigger blowout, I guess, or a blow up of the area that the applicant provided to you. You'll see Discount Tire there with the proposed sign labeled on the north side of the building and on the west side and on the south side of the building. And then south of that building is, you'll see a building footprint there. That is Cumberland Farms. And then there's a dental office to the east of that. From what I'm hearing, the applicant is more, I guess, they believe that the sign on the south side is more important to them than the sign on the north side that they're proposing on the illustration here.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Parrish, on the north side of this building, I know you said it's adjacent to a vacant lot. That would be a separate, individually owned property, not part of this parcel, is that correct?
Correct.
And that property that's unimproved would be actually adjacent to Foley, the cut through.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, in my looking at it, I could see, especially people taking the curve going off the interstate, they could see that south sign better. They could see the west sign on the building itself. So would that be a compromise if we were to consider 2 instead of 3?
Yes, sir.
All right, so good.
They would be most grateful.
All right. You have a comment, sir?
Yes, the south elevation fronts actually the internal driveway, which as people would come into the site, that would be the sign that they would be looking for, would be the identifying sign over the office area. So that CF indication on page 24 would be the area most critical to helping identify the site. Additionally, the AD elevation on the west side would identify from people coming down 405, which would be pretty critical to their business. So I would say that might be a reasonable compromise to go with the west elevation and the south elevation approved, and I can't justify the north elevation.
Any other questions of this witness? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Do we have any other cards, please?
No, sir.
Very well. Then we will close this portion of the public hearing and bring it back for discussion or further questions of staff. Discussion, whichever you want to do. Yeah.
My problem is there really needs to be a change to the code to address this issue, because I feel this way every day I drive down Garden Street on Dunkin' Donuts. I think to myself, why is there not signage coming toward the west? I think that every single day. And when I look at this, the code simply prohibits it. And there's no good reason to violate the code to grant this request. But there is a reasonable point in granting the request, because as people are driving into a shared parking lot to identify where they're trying to go, it is 100% reasonable that they have a sign in the parking lot. On the north side, it's not attached to Foley and doesn't belong there. But on the south side, in the parking lot, it is 100% reasonable, as well as on their actual frontage. I personally agree with it, and I think it should be granted, but it violates the code, and therefore I think it should not be granted. I think the code needs to be amended to address this very issue, which I know we can't do. We can simply say that out loud and encourage the city to do something about it, but that's what really needs to be done to fix this problem. Because it's not just this company, and it's not gonna end right here. That is all.
Other comments? Well, I personally agree with you that there's some changes that need to be made, and maybe with us making exceptions, that will go up the chain to make some changes. Yes, sir.
I think clearly the internal driveway access is a special condition that would allow us to approve the variance for the additional sign.
Anyone care to make a motion then, please?
In reference to variance request number 14-2022, 4655 South Street, requesting a variance to section 3210A, recommend approval of the one additional wall sign on the south side, south elevation of the building, in addition to the primary wall sign on the west. So you would have location A, west elevation, and location C, the south elevation.
I will second that motion.
Mr. Wheel,
Yes.
may I interrupt? Can you identify a basis for your recommended approval, your motion to approve?
The special condition associated with the internal access driveway that's shared by 3 other businesses.
All right. So we've had a motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Clarification? All right. May we have roll call, please?
Chairman Taylor?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Smith Rodriguez?
Yes.
Member Beckles?
Yes.
Member Wheelis?
Yes,
Alternate Member Van Zyl de Jong?
Yes.
Well, very good. Well, you have a compromise, and I hope you can justify it with your bosses. All right. All right. Special, that's good. All right, thank you. Okay, next item up is variance application number 16-2022 with the address of 2525 Garden Street. Staff, I think we're back to signs again.
So this application begins on page 45 of your packet. And I'll go straight to page 47, the first page of the staff report, and quickly summarize here. The applicant, Shannon Parker of Sign Access Incorporated, is requesting a variance to the code, section 32-10A, same code section, wall sign regulations, to allow a second wall sign to be located internal to the site in lieu of being affixed to the secondary right-of-way frontage. The property is on 2525 Garden Street. The future land use on the property is commercial low intensity. The zoning on the property is office professional. The surrounding zoning is office to the north, single family to the south, office again to the east and west along Garden Street. Beginning on the page 48 of your packet, which is page 2 of the staff report, the parcel is rectangular in shape with street frontages on Garden Street and South Holiday Lane, which is a local road. Garden Street's the arterial, and South Holiday Lane, being the local road, leads on to a subdivision behind this property. The parcel meets the minimum width and area requirements in the OP zoning district. A medical office use will be established on the property, which is consistent with the OP zoning district. I won't repeat or summarize the criteria. Bottom of page 48 of your packet, which is page 2 of the staff report, and then going into page 49, of your packet. I'll summarize the analysis and recommendation. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow a second wall sign to be located internal to the site and not face a street. A Medfast medical clinic will occupy the existing building. The building is located at the center of the parcel between two on-site parking lots. I'll show an illustration of that in a moment. Beginning on page 49 of your packet, Section 32-10A states, and I paraphrased here again, each separately licensed business shall be allowed one wall sign. Buildings having more than one street frontage on an existing paved right-of-way may have one additional wall sign fixed to that secondary right-of-way frontage. Regardless of the number of street frontages, no more than 2 wall signs shall be permitted. The parcel has 2 street frontages, Garden Street and Holiday Avenue. One wall sign will face Garden Street. Second wall sign is required to face Holiday Avenue. The applicant is asking for that wall sign to be put on the east side of the building, instead facing one of the internal parking lots. The requirement that a wall sign face a street frontage appears relevant to ensuring the public can view the business name from the public right-of-way. There are a number of trees located between the building and Holiday Avenue. The trees will obscure the view of the sign from the public right-of-way, and the city has an interest in protecting trees. The applicant is proposing to install the sign on the east side of the building. The applicant is entitled to 2 signs. The proposed sign location should not confer upon the applicant any special privilege that is denied to others. Staff recommends approval of the variance request to allow a second wall sign to be located internal to the site and not face a street. There appear to be special conditions on the property that may obscure the sign visibility from the street, and the literal interpretation of the code could deprive the applicant rights commonly enjoyed by others. So with that, I'm going to send you to page 50 of your packet. And that's the zoning map, and you can see, gives you an idea of where this property is located on the south. It doesn't look very clear, I'm sorry, on the south side of Garden Street. And behind it are single-family lots. Then on page 57 of your packet, there I point you to some photographs that were provided to us by the applicant. This is a photograph taken, it looks like, looking at the west elevation, which is someone standing there on Holiday Avenue. The next page, on page 58 of your packet, is another photograph that was provided to us by the applicant. And I believe this is looking at the parking lot immediately to the east of this building. On page 59 of your packet, you'll see a survey of the property. And again, you can see it has 2 right-of-way frontages. The building is between 2 parking lots. The applicant is proposing to continue to have a wall sign facing Garden Street on the north facade, but then the wall sign that the code would require to be located on the west elevation will be moved to the east elevation. And on page 60, you'll see an illustration of that wall sign. The applicant did last week submit to us a new drawing. They said that this drawing apparently was incorrect. I compared it to you, I was not able to identify what the difference was, but I did include that drawing that was submitted to us, or it was emailed to you separately, but we also included on the Agenda Star, so if you want to see that new drawing, it's in the Agenda Star folder, so you just have to minimize your agenda that you have there, and you'll see the folder called Agenda Star. Open that up, and you'll see the document. If you need any help opening it up, just please tell me. Finally, on page 62 of your packet, you'll see another drawing of the property itself, and you'll see the parking lots as laid out on both sides of this building, and where they're proposing to put the second wall sign. With that, I'll try and answer any questions you have about this, and I believe the applicant is here to also answer any questions.
All right. Any question?
Back to the section of the code. Is there, and I looked up the definition, I pulled up Municode and I was looking at the definition of right-of-way. Does the code address a primary right-of-way versus a secondary right-of-way? Is Garden Street more important than Holiday Lane in this scenario?
I don't recall that. I don't recall seeing something that says that the code would require, if you're allowed to have 2 wall signs, that one is a primary, more important than the other. I think to the business owner, it'd probably be more important to have that wall sign facing the arterial road.
Because I would maintain that a basic reading of the statute says you are entitled to one wall sign, which says to me that you could put your wall sign on any wall. And then it says if you happen to have a secondary right of way, then it must be on that right of way. So to me, they could put their wall sign on the east side by just reading the statute without a variance. And then also without a variance, they can put their secondary sign required on the right of way on Garden Street. That's how I read the plain language of that code. So if there's something else in the code or somewhere else in the code that I'm missing that defines it, then I would like to know that.
So a property that would be only facing one right-of-way, as like the previous example, the previous case, they are entitled to only one wall sign. I guess what you're saying here, based on what you're reading, that they could possibly put that sign anywhere on any facade in that building.
I mean, yeah, looking at let me go back to I don't remember what page it was.
I inserted the code section on page 51 of your packet, the whole code section.
Oh, the whole code? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So when I'm reading this, it just says, except as authorized by this section, each separately licensed business shall be allowed one wall sign. It doesn't say where that wall sign needs to go. So if this code is what we're following and it doesn't require the wall sign to be on any particular side or part of the building, then they could put it wherever. But the code is very clear that if they do have a second right-of-way, then the signage must be on a right-of-way. So if you have two right-of-ways, I would say you're only required to put a sign on one right-of-way, according to a plain reading of this code.
I could see the situation where if we have, I guess, say, for example, a retail plaza or a mixed-use development, and they decide to have, and they have a lot of buildings that are internal to the site, Titus Landing, for example. And so you have one of those buildings there that has a sign facing an internal parking lot. Years later, someone says, I want to put a sign that's facing a public right-of-way. I could see some argument, I guess, to say, well, I'm entitled to have one facing a right-of-way. You're just allowing me to have this sign facing the parking lot in the first place. I kind of, when I read it, I kind of see, well, if they're asking them to have, if you're saying the second sign has to face a public right-of-way, then kind of implies that the first one should be facing one too.
I agree it's implied, but it's certainly not express. And so if we're taking notes on changes to the code, I'd write that one down too.
Just for clarity, what you handed us today, this is the east elevation of the building, is that correct? And that does look like a main parking lot for, I should say, customers?
Yeah, what was handed to us later, or last week, separate from after the agenda was published, it does state east elevation. Yeah, okay, so Kim confirmed with the applicant as well.
Yeah, it's east, right, it says there. So, all right. Any other questions, staff, before we open up? All right, don't see any. So we'll open this up. Let's have our first card, please.
Were you for this agenda? Were you for this agenda item? Were you here for this agenda item? Yes, number 3. Okay. Joe Courtier?
Yes.
Welcome, sir. Your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. I'm Joe Couturier. I live at 110 Woods South in Merritt Island. Okay. All right. This gentleman did a very good job of explaining the situation. I am here to represent Dr. Williams, who owns the MedFast, and here to answer any questions that I can. But I believe he explained the situation pretty clearly. So, okay.
Well, just to clarify, where you're wanting to put the sign is kind of where the public or your customers would be parking. The other side, it looks like more like a staff, maybe?
It is that or secondary, certainly. There's a parking lot being developed on the east side where the sign is, and that's the main entrance into the building, yes.
That will be the main entrance.
So the sign would be over the main entrance, which is also a
Okay,
good idea.
okay. I could see it being there on the south end myself. Yes, sir? Anybody else have anything? Wow, you got off easy.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Did we have any other cards, ma'am?
No, sir.
All right. So we will close the public hearing part and bring it back for the commission for this board for a recommendation or questions of staff. Besides more notes on cleaning up.
Well, I said
10A.
my part already.
Well, considering what you said, do we have to make an action? Yes.
So I don't think a variance is required. I don't know if council wants to weigh in.
Apparently, staff has interpreted the code to require one, and they've recommended approval, and they've asked for the approval. So certainly, based on that, you could approve, if you're inclined to do it, the request for the variance and advise council or recommend that they look at that section of the code to clarify that.
All right, I don't know if there's further discussion. I was gonna move.
No, that's fine.
All right.
Good.
I will make a motion to approve variance 16-2022 regarding 2525 Garden Street, a variance to the LDR section 32-10 subsection A regarding placement of a second wall sign. I will specify the criteria, although I think the express reading of the code does not require a variance. To the extent staff has interpreted as such, I would cite that the literal interpretation of those provisions of that ordinance would deprive the applicant of commonly enjoyed rights as the other properties do.
All right. We have a motion. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second the motion.
Good. Thank you. Is there further discussion? Seeing no lights, may we have roll call, please?
Member Beckles?
Yes.
Member Wheelis?
Yes.
Alternate Member Van Zyl de Jong?
Yes.
Chairman Taylor?
Yes?
Vice Chairman Smith Rodriguez?
Yes.
All right. You're all set to go, sir. Thank you. All right, moving right along. Next, our third application is number 17-2022, and the address for that is 2535 Mary Lane. Staff?
This last last variance application begins on page 71 of your packet. And I'll skip to page 73 of your packet, which is the first page of the staff report. So the applicant, NJ Morris Holdings LLC, is requesting a variance to the code section 30-332, required landscape yards, to eliminate a 20-foot buffer on all sides. This is specifically to allow for a duplex on a multifamily zone piece of property. The lot is located at 2535 Mary Lane. The future land use on the property is medium-density residential. Medium-density. The zoning on the property is medium-density residential. We've got that incorrect there, I'm sorry. The surrounding zoning on the property is multifamily to the north and to the east and to the west, and south of the property is single-family. The parcel is rectangular in shape with 80 feet of frontage on Mary Lane and 145 feet deep. The parcel was created by approval of a minor division process in 2004. The parcel meets the dimension requirements for a duplex building in the R2 zoning district. So I'll refer to a zoning map so you can see what the actual zoning is on the property. The property is multifamily, R2, only allows multifamily, so duplex is a permitted use. Does not allow single-family detached structures on this property. The lot was created through what's called a minor division at the time. That it was a process that was in existence at that time. It allowed property owners to subdivide pieces of property without actually calling it a plat. And so it was a document that was recorded in a survey book with the county. But that's it. It wasn't an actual plat. So I'll show you an illustration that shows where this piece of property was subdivided into 4 parcels, basically. And so the applicant is hoping to build on one of them. On page 74 of your packet is the criteria. I've already summarized that at the beginning of the meeting. So the analysis I'll summarize here. The applicant is requesting a variance to eliminate the required 20-foot landscape yard requirement for a multifamily development. Even though this is one duplex, the code looks at this as a site plan, and so therefore the landscaping requirements have to be adhered to. So the applicant is asking for some relief from that 20-foot landscape buffer requirement for all residential developments. You'll see on the parcel as I show you that there are actually there are 10-foot setbacks on the sides, but they are able to meet the 20-foot setbacks on the front and 25 feet in the back, so they can accommodate the landscape yards according to the code in the front and the back, but they can't do it on the sides. And I'll point that out to you in a moment. The minimum required landscape yard on the side is 20 feet, whereas the minimum side building setback is 10 feet. Adhering to the code could result in a 40-foot wide duplex building. The minimum required landscape yards in the front and rear are 20 feet, whereas the minimum front and rear building setbacks are 25. According to the minimum required front and rear landscape yards appears feasible based on the dimensions of the parcel. So we split our recommendation to you. Staff recommends approval of a variance to the minimum required 20-foot wide side landscape yards to a minimum of 5 feet in width. The landscape yard requirement prevents the property from being used for its intended purpose. Special conditions appear to exist to prevent reasonable use of the property for its intended purpose. A narrow multifamily structure might not be able to meet other dimensional development standards. The reduction of the side landscape yards to 5 feet would provide adequate area for the minimum required vegetation to be planted. Our second recommendation is to deny the request for the 20-foot landscape requirements from the front and the rear. The landscape yards and minimum vegetation can be met within the required setbacks of the building. Special conditions do not appear to prevent the applicant from adhering to the front and rear landscape yard requirements. So I'm going to refer you to page 84 of your packet. And this is a survey, I believe, or a drawing that was provided by the applicant showing the parcel and where they propose to put the duplex structure with the, looks like 2 driveways there. And you can see the setbacks or the distances from the structure from the surrounding property lines. So in the front, they've got 26 feet to the property line, so they can accommodate a landscape buffer there. They've got 64 feet on the rear there, so they can accommodate a 20-foot landscape buffer there. On the sides, they cannot. Those are one side. On the east side, it looks like it's narrowest at 9.5 feet there, and on the west side, it's about a little more than 10 feet. I'm going to refer you to page 85 of your packet. The applicant has shown an illustration here of what the building envelope would be as a result of trying to adhere to this 20-foot landscape requirement, and it's very narrow. You would, no matter what they would do, they would violate the code. On page 87 of your packet, it's kind of strange. I'm going to refer you to that. This is an old zoning atlas sheet, but it does show, if you zoom in on that corner on Mary Lane and Mantor, excuse me, yes. You'll see there those 4 lots that I mentioned. It's called minor sub, that's subdivision. Survey book 9, page 57. That was an approval process we had in existence back in 2004, so it allows someone to take a large piece of property and subdivide it without having to go through a formal plat process. But you can only do that up to 10 lots at the time, as long as you're not dedicating any new infrastructure or streets to us. So that's how this parcel was created. There's an aerial on page 92 of your packet. And you'll see the vacant lot between the 2 already developed parcels of this minor division. Then in the very last page of your packet, 97, is the zoning map. And you'll see that the property is zoned R2, which is multifamily. There may be single-family homes on both sides. That may have been, that at one point was a permitted use. Up until 2006 in this zoning district, they were considered to be patio homes, which are basically detached single-family homes. So that's what you see there. But since that has been that use was taken away by an ordinance back in 2006, Only multifamily development is allowed in this zoning district. So the applicant is proposing a duplex, and that's what's triggering a site plan, and therefore all the development standards, including this landscape buffer requirement. So with that, I'll try and answer any questions you have. I believe the applicants are also here to answer any questions.
So from what you said, what's on either side of this particular property could not be built?
If these parcels were empty right now and they wanted to build single-family homes, they could not build single-family homes, no.
Exactly. But the parcel itself, you couldn't put a single-family home on it at this point,
Correct.
okay?
The applicant indicates that they wanted it to be in similar surroundings as the other properties with its buffers and landscapes. Looking at, I'm on page 92, that parcel 825, it's obviously not quite clear, but
To the west of it?
yeah, just to
Okay.
the west of it. Does that have 25 feet in the front? I mean, 832 looks like, I assume it looks further back. I don't know. It's a pretty fuzzy photo.
They may meet the setbacks of that zoning district as when they were permitted at the time. So at the times, patio homes that when they were permitted in this zoning district had their own setbacks.
But I don't mean at the time. I mean now. Like, is there 25 feet from the front to the structure on those two side properties?
I don't have that information.
Okay.
I mean, there's a quick and dirty way of doing that, using the property appraiser's website, kind of do a quick and dirty measurement. So I
Okay.
can give you an estimate if you give me a moment.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I mean, I'm sure I could ask the applicants and see what they know. That was part of their justification in their application. That's what I was following up on. No other questions?
Okay. Well, any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open it up to the public hearing at this time. First card, please.
John Morris.
Mr. Morris, welcome. Your name and address for the record today, please.
Thank you. It's John Morris. It's 4001 Ainsley Avenue in Orlando, Florida, 32833. Chairman, Board, I appreciate you taking the time and allowing us to be here. Mr. Parrish, thank you very much for putting this together. So I'm going to address the first comment first, if I may. We are in the process of developing a multifamily site on the corner of Elizabeth and Whispering. It's 5 acres, it'll be 28 units, so we're very familiar with the landscape buffer requirements. Our concern is that inside a landscape buffer, we are not allowed to do any improvements. So with the 5-foot setback on the side, drainage might be an issue. If you refer back to page 84 of the site plan, we have a 10-foot between the property line and our structure, which to be able to go in and stick landscape oak trees, bushes and such, that would be the equivalent of what you would see in a multifamily subdivision perimeter. It would be and encumber the draining of the property. It would also encumber location of AC units. They would not be permissible inside of a landscape buffer, and various other construction materials that might happen along the way. So our concern is what is the definition of the requirement of a landscape buffer? And could we confine this to possibly just sod?
I believe what you're asking is, can this, if you granted the variance to the side landscape yards, that it also includes no need to put that vegetation that's required of that buffer?
Correct.
That is part of your request. So that could be included as part of because you had requested for it to be completely eliminated, basically. So
Yeah.
that includes any vegetation.
The original request to eliminate the entire landscape buffer around all 4 corners or sides of the property was our original design. It would be consistent with the neighborhood. It'd be consistent with a normal single-family lot. It would conform to the surrounding homes. It would be much like you would see, not necessarily a subdivision per se. When you pull in, you got oak trees, shrubs, oak trees, shrubs, kind of boarding the perimeter here. So That would, yes. So that would partly be our request would be to eliminate all landscaping inside that buffer. The next would be to eliminate the buffer in general, which leads into our request number 2 is the 20-foot front and rear. If we did that, our driveways would impede inside the buffer, which would not be allowed. Any sort of structures in the backyard, pools, sheds, playground equipment, those would impede inside the landscape buffer and would not be allowed. If you also, and I don't think that the site plan on page 84 necessarily gives you the full picture. If you flip to page 96, you would see that the rear yard is encumbered by a drainage pond and the growth that is surrounded by the drainage pond. So we wouldn't, the impact of the 20-foot buffer would be the entire backyard. So kids playing would be minimized. Any kind of interaction inside that would be, avoided. So the request is to kind of conform, our wish is to not do any landscaping at all, but do 2 canopy trees in the backyard, maybe 2 canopy trees in the front yard, followed up with some understory trees and bushes like you would see in a normal house or a normal platted lot.
Just so you know, the landscape buffer requirements do have a minimum number of vegetation that's required. So you have a 20-foot landscape buffer or you decide to reduce it in size, there's still that minimum vegetation requirement. And what was referred to as the canopy trees, overstory trees, there's one that's required per certain number of feet. There's understory trees, one required per certain number of feet. And also that includes bushes or shrubs rather. So I think what the applicant is asking for is for all of that to be included as part of their variance, get that approved, but then only be limited to or be asked to just put in overstory trees, 2 in the front, 2 in the back.
So if we abide by the code, and you're correct, thank you for pointing that out, it's 1 canopy tree for every 15 feet of frontage. So we have an 80-foot wide lot. We're looking at 6 to 7 oak trees in the front yard, which could be kind of restrictive when you take into effect that we have to do 2 individual driveways. So it's not leaving you much room for the canopy trees that are required per the code. Now, just as a point of reference, it is a lot of record. However, it is not a platted lot. If this was a platted lot, it would be we would not need this variance at all, correct?
I can't answer that question. This particular case, this is what was required because it was a multifamily development on this parcel.
So we had requested that, if it's multifamily, can we do single family to be consistent with the neighborhood? And they agree that we can go in for that zoning change. However, because it's not a platted lot, we'd still be confined to the code of a subdivision. It would fall in the lines of more of a traditional single family neighborhood requirements than it would a multifamily.
I think there was a question about trying to rezone the property to single family, but I think the single family required a minimum dimension. That's probably what it needed. And so you probably needed, I'm not sure. I can't really answer that question.
So to sum up, we're asking to eliminate the landscape buffer requirements for this lot and then be confined to 4 canopy trees and then a landscape package that would be conducive to the neighborhood surroundings.
So how many canopy trees you said would have to be, just literally, and for the little interpretation, how many?
Well, if we went based off of the site plan.
If the code says an overstory tree, an overstory or canopy tree is 4 per 200 feet, so that's 1 per 50 feet. Mm-hmm. Coniferous tree is 1 per 100 feet. An understory tree is 1 per 200 feet. And then there's shrubs that are required 1 per 15 feet. Those are the requirements of vegetation inside of landscape buffers. So this property is, if we could look at the width of the lot.
On page 84, so you're 80 front and then you're 145 to the rear. But the 145 does not encompass, is not a fully developable lot. It's a part of that's in a body of water. So, correct. So for every 200 feet, so we're looking 10 to 12 oak trees, 4 to 6 pine trees, and then a bunch of understory shrubs to go along with that.
Yeah, then we run into problems with everything on the roofs and houses and insurance companies having fits. And as
Root systems breaking up
when
our
they're first put in,
neighbors.
that's fine, but as we see developments around, as the years go on, the roots, the trees they get bigger.
Yeah.
Yes, sir? Go ahead.
Are you familiar with the landscape requirements for single family?
We are.
Could
For a
you-
platted
could-
single-family lot,
could-
yes.
Mr. Parrish, could you summarize those for the board?
I believe that, I have to look at it, if you want to give me a moment, but I recall it does require one tree, or two trees, one inside the right-of-way and one inside, it's like a boulevard tree, and there's one on the property, and it does require a certain amount of vegetation, such as shrubs. So there are some certain minimum standards for single-family developments for each lot.
All right. Given that, and given that this is essentially in the middle of a single-family neighborhood, and the idea is not to make this stand out from the neighborhoods, to be developed within the character and atmosphere of a neighborhood, would that work for you?
Indeed, it would. In fact, I think what we're offering is
It makes
is
sense.
more than what would be required. I think it's just 2 trees, we're offering 4. Since it's 2 separate units, well, it's an attached villa, so it'd be 2 units, so 2 trees for each.
Other questions of this applicant?
Not of the
Not of the applicant. Very well, sir. Thank you very much.
I greatly thank you guys.
And are there any other cards?
No, sir.
All right. Don't want to speak, huh? Put you on the spot. All right, we'll close the public hearing at this time. All right, have a question for staff?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Mr. Parrish, can you address Mr. Morris' comment that the ignoring vegetation for a second, the landscape buffer would prevent a driveway or a pool or a playset?
So landscape buffers are not allowed to have anything in them. Sometimes we get requests to have drainage facilities inside a landscape buffer, and that requires an administrative waiver that has to be justified. But yes, you wouldn't be able to put a pool inside a landscape buffer. As far as driveway, that's just access to your property. That's not something that's prevented. We always will approve those kind of things through buffers. It's like any kind of, even commercial development, they have to have a driveway through the buffer to get to their property. So, but yes, those accessory structures, yes, those would be prevented inside those landscape buffers.
Okay. Anyone else have a question of staff? Or thoughts on? what was
If I'm looking
presented?
at page 84 properly, in the backyard, from the property line to the structure, it's just shy of 65 feet, correct?
Correct.
So 25 feet is required,
20.
20 feet is,
There's 25 feet for the rear, for the building setback for the zoning code, but what the question is tonight is about a landscape buffer, which is 20 feet.
okay, from the structure.
20 feet is the landscape requirement. So along that south property line, there would be a requirement of a 20-foot landscape buffer.
From the back line toward the house,
That's correct.
20 feet landscape,
Uh-huh.
which leaves 45 feet.
Yeah, a significant chunk there would be remainder.
Yeah.
Which part of it's underwater? According to him, back in the.
If we look at the soils map on page 95, we see that there's a significant wet portion of that lot. I don't have a measurement of how far it actually intrudes into the lot, but it appears to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 feet.
In the landscape buffer.
And that would be in the middle of the landscape buffer, so that it would be impossible to essentially plant anything in that area anyway. It's essentially unusable part of the lot.
Okay.
Still get to pay taxes on it, though. Waterfront property, okay, yeah, more valuable, right? All right. Any other discussion or questions? If seeing none, I'll take a recommendation or a motion.
By way of discussion, it would seem that dealing with the side yard is easy because that's, clear problem, removing that. But the front can still have access by the way of driveway, and the back seems to still have substantial land and space to use. I understand that they can't plant in, a lake, I get that, but by eliminating the landscape entirely doesn't seem justified.
No, I agree, eliminating entirely is not justified, but I would say, as I suggested, perhaps apply the requirements for single family as a minimum standard to, for that to actually be the variance. And I don't know how to phrase that appropriately. That's my hang up here.
Mr. Wheelis, so on page, I don't know if you want to look at Muni Code and see, but on section 30-333, paragraph A7, residential lots, here's what the code says. All residential lots, this is for applied to single families, shall provide a minimum of one boulevard tree planted between the curb and the lot line, the curb of the road, and one front yard tree planted between the lot line and the front building line. So that's what that says. I think that's what you were referring to earlier.
Is that section again?
It's section 30-333, paragraph A7. I don't know if it's up to that was the chair.
Please.
A little bit more. Thank you for a second chance. So just as a clarification, in between the curb, the right-of-way, I have a drainage ditch. So planting a tree would not conform.
Repeat that?
There's a drainage ditch in the right-of-way.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
On the front side.
in the front side.
This section of the code is something we typically apply when we're reviewing and approving new subdivisions.
Oh, okay.
So if you take an existing lot that was created some time ago, it may not be able to meet this current standard.
And then, just as part of another rebuttal, the backyard is not entirely usable because of the pond. You're correct. So if we did a landscape buffer, that would encompass the entire usable backyard.
That doesn't sound right. From the lot line in the back, up how many feet is with water?
You're, I don't know, not without knowing off the top of my head, it's approximately 25 to 30 feet from the back corner of the lot to the house.
Okay.
So that leaves me roughly 30 feet, 35 feet of usable yard. So that would give them a 15-foot backyard.
So the landscape buffer can't include the part underwater? I mean, if that's the buffer and he simply can't put a tree in a lake,
So we didn't have this information other than what we have here on the soils maps, that there's a partial encroachment of potential water into the property, but we don't have those dimensions.
but does that move the buffer up then?
It's possible.
Is it required to move it up?
So the application on the code is up to the property line. If you got a water that's along there, we probably won't even ask for a buffer along that water, as far as I can tell, but I can't really answer that question.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
If you look at page 92 of your packet, you'll see the aerial. There's no indication to us that there's water on the property or encroaching into the property. Survey didn't identify that. But you see on the aerial, there's water behind the property. We don't have information that, again, that there's a water body encroaching or on the property itself. So I didn't have this information. This is the first time I've heard this. That is not based on a survey. This is GIS data. So without that survey, I couldn't even confirm whether that information is accurate on a survey dimension. It does indicate there's a potential for water there. But the survey that's provided to us by the applicant didn't identify that.
Are there further questions of anyone or comments about the justification here? Yeah,
Well, we can break this up in parts, yes? And then
staff did.
collect our thoughts. So let me start with what's easy. All right. I move to grant in part variance 17-2022 at 2535 Mary Lane regarding a variance to section 30-332, specifically the side yard landscape buffer, which, for clarification, also removes vegetation requirements. No.
So your I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. So your motion is to grant the applicant's request to have no buffer on those side yards. Staff had recommended reducing it down to 5 feet, but you could certainly.
Hold on, let me look at the picture again. Maybe I misread it. Oh, because it's 10 feet. I need to pause my motion then for a second. Can I invite the applicant back up, please?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Mr. Morris, you were saying that you can't put in AC unit and a couple other things. Is that still your position with a 5-yard setback, 5 feet?
Given that it's 10 feet, no, not entirely, as long as it is property line to 5 feet. Keep in mind that it will be the swell in between the houses, so this will be used to flow the water to the front ditch. So as long as it's from the house out 5 feet, so we can put our AC units, so that way the AC units don't encumber into the landscape buffer, then I don't see a problem with that.
Right, that's my understanding then. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what staff was suggesting?
So, Mr. Morris, on this illustration, then on page 84 of the packet here, you'll see the side yards about 10 feet on both sides. You're going to have an AC unit there, plus a 5-foot landscape buffer there, and drainage. Will that drainage and those AC units be located inside that landscape buffer? Or you don't know that for sure?
It's hard to say without the placement of it and how the grade is, because we're looking at one-dimensional or two-dimensional. If it's depending on the adjacent house and how the yard slopes, there could be a pretty significant valley.
Mr. Morris's request right now to you is to eliminate it. So if you grant that, then he doesn't have an issue. But if you grant it based on the staff's recommendation, then the question is, can he still adhere to the code? Because if he's going to have drainage in that area, then it has to be outside of that buffer. He'll have to get an administrative waiver and justify if he wants to put it inside that buffer.
Right.
AC units would not be allowed inside that 5-foot buffer. So it's really a question of whether you want to deny the request or approve Mr. Morris's request, no landscape buffer on the sides, or go with staff's recommendation.
What I'm trying to accomplish is to let an AC unit sit there in the house and to get your drainage, but to allow some level of landscape if possible. That would be my aspirational motion.
Yeah, it's warranted. I think the landscape would eventually would die. Whatever you put there, it's gonna be in the drainage swell, so it would impede drainage.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I think it's consistent with how you see a normal neighborhood. You drive around, there's no landscaping vegetation, on the lot line in between two houses. And then the second one, back to the front yard buffer, I don't know if there's enough square footage to accommodate the required number of trees. Because you're 26, you're 80 feet wide minus the 16-foot driveway, so that's 32. So that leaves you with, 48 minus the buffer in between the two driveways. And we're also in the well reclaim area, so our impact is minimal already. So that leaves you roughly 20 feet on either side of the driveway to the property line. So to be able to conform and place 3 to 4 canopy trees on each side would be kind of cumbersome.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Morris.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
To be clear, Mr. Parrish, in a landscape buffer cannot overlap a drainage structure or grading.
That is correct.
Okay, so that, that will not, it has to be eliminated completely on the side yard.
All right. Making a motion, take 2. I move to grant in part variance 17-2022, 2535 Mary Lane regarding section of the LDR 30-332 to eliminate the side landscape buffer. Period.
I approve the motion. I second the motion.
Okay. Staff, is that a reasonable?
If that's your motion, I just will ask if you could clarify or maybe provide some kind of basis for the motion.
The literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties. I guess, you know what, in light of, let me clarify that, because in light of the properties that are on it, even though they're in that zoning, they are a little bit different. Let me say that there are also special circumstances, or special conditions and circumstances peculiar to that land in light of the zoning and surrounding area.
All right, sir. Does your second still hold, sir?
Yes, it does. Yes.
All right. Any further discussion on this part of the motion, or this motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Member Wheelis,
Yes.
alternate member Van Zildjian,
Yes.
McChairman Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Smith Rodriguez,
Yes.
Member Beckles.
Yes.
Okay. We took care of the side yards. Now, I personally see a problem with putting a lot of trees in the front with the driveways. There's just not, we've had this discussion on other properties about too much vegetation, and I can see that's going to be a problem, trying to meet the code to put all those vehicles, especially with you got the drainage coming from the sides, and you got the ditch in the front, you can't plant anything in there.
Is it appropriate to then modify the amount of trees or vegetation that goes in without eliminating an entire buffer? Right, if the applicant is suggesting 2, and he was running through his quick math while I'm looking at a picture over here, if it's 2 in the front and 2 in the back, perhaps that would be a compromise that the code would be okay with.
I would agree 100%.
Yeah.
That's reduce the requirements to, is it to overstory or?
What was that called? What was that definition of that tree? Would you, two? I mean,
And the
that's-
applicant suggested 2 overstory trees in the front and 2 in the back, and landscape conducive with the surrounding area in the neighborhood. I don't think eliminating the entire landscape buffer in the front and the back is appropriate.
It'd be two, it sounds, canopy overstory trees is what we're referring to. That's the larger one. And then underneath is coniferous, and the next one is understory trees. And then below that are shrubs. So it sounds like the applicant is asking to only have to put in a couple of overstory trees. In the front there, at least.
I would think more smaller trees would be a problem. Now, some shrubs, I could see that. But if you're gonna have 2 big trees, I know in my neighborhood, we got one big tree, and we got all these other trees, and they're all crowded in together, you can't see each other, and then we're cutting them out. They're just eliminating them, because they were great when they were little, but they get big. So I
Is
can
it required that we set a number of trees or shrubs or weeds right now? Is it possible to simply recommend a reduction of that requirement and then encourage there to be a discussion between applicant and staff to accomplish the board's goal without actually setting a number of trees and shrubs?
Staff has
Let
to
me see if I
approve.
understand. So maybe potentially reduce the size of the buffer. If you did that only, this minimum required number of vegetation would still adhere. We wouldn't be able to waive that.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able
unless
to waive it. We have to set it.
You have a condition or include as part of your motion to reduce the size of the buffer and also reduce the number of vegetation required to a set number.
So I think what I was trying to get at was to only reduce the amount of vegetation.
Okay.
Would be my suggestion. Mr. Willis, is that what your thoughts were in line with?
That's very reasonable. That would work.
So in light of reducing, if the board were to agree with that and want to reduce the amount of vegetation, are we required right now to set exactly what that vegetation is? Or is that something that the applicant and staff can discuss amongst themselves, who are probably more suited and qualified than for us to say willy-nilly what it is right now?
If you're unable to come up with a specific number, you could say things maybe half the required or a quarter of the required, something like that. It will give us better guidance and better, something we could follow. Because if you allow us, if you're asking us to negotiate with the applicant, we don't have that authority to do that.
And I hesitate to assign, obviously, a number. Saying somewhere in the ballpark of a quarter might sound good, but I mean, I'm not prepared to know exactly how many shrubs and what type of shrubs and what type of trees. I'm not prepared to be able, I don't think I'm even able to make that decision right now on an informed basis. But I'm also not prepared to deny the variance outright. But I'm also not prepared to say only 2 trees are appropriate when I don't know if 2 trees are appropriate.
Given the size of the lot and being a homeowner for the last 40 years, I would say that 2 in the front and 2 in the back are very appropriate for this lot and the conditions that we're faced with.
Especially since that's what the applicant proposed, and
Specific.
with him knowing the characteristics of the property, and obviously that's what he thinks that he can't accommodate, so.
And no other vegetation, like ignore all other vegetation requirements other than trees?
We said shrubs. I mean,
Consistent
allow
with the.
shrubs, but those medium-sized trees, I would say no other vegetation. What was another sizes you used?
So there's overstory, coniferous, understory, and shrubs.
Okay. Shrubs, I could see. I kind of
Okay.
noticed him shaking his head. Yeah, maybe for some shrubs. I mean, everybody has a shrub or 2, hopefully, around their house. But that mid-sized, yeah, okay.
Chairman, are we moving?
You have another comment, sir? You have to use the microphone, sir. Get your exercise in.
I appreciate you guys working with us. So the legal requirements on a landscape buffer, how is it enforceable with code enforcement? You know, if we were to sell this property and other people may come along and decide to disturb the area that they cannot touch.
I don't think we can answer that question. Wrong department.
So
The guy in the suit might be able to.
So I guess my request would be to remove the landscape buffers front and rear while holding me to a higher standard than what a normal single-family home would be required to do, which would be the two in the front, two in the back. And now, I mean, it's a pretty robust landscape package. It's not going to be 2 or 3 flowers. I mean, we do a pretty nice job with palm trees and robollinis and ligustrums, which are the big furry green shrubs, and some sweet garlic. So it would be probably, having owned a house in that neighborhood currently, it would probably be the best landscaping job in that neighborhood.
So does that fit a number, quarter, half, third? What-
To repeat the
We
question,
can't
is
just
the
say
applicant?
4?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You can't just say 4, like he's proposing?
Well, that's the big ones. Yeah, I'm talking about that. We're talking about the little stuff now.
And then say,
Oh,
keep
if-
it consistent with the other houses in the neighborhood?
If I may, can we go to page 90, or to the site plan, 86 or 84?
Page 84 of your packet's the plan.
Mr. Pierce, may I look with you?
Yeah.
If it's acceptable and easy to quantify this, given the front elevation, we're at 59 is the building structure. Minus out the driveway and the area between the driveway, which we would naturally do a hedge down to separate the two individual properties. That leaves me with approximately 15 feet on either side of the driveway. Can we say 20 shrubs or hedges per unit, so a total of 40, which is a pretty robust landscape package? So my ask would be,
That is a lot of plants.
yeah,
So 20 shrubs plus a tree for each unit.
20 shrubs plus 2 trees for each unit.
2 trees for each
One in
unit.
the front, one in the back.
Oh.
So my request would be to eliminate all landscape buffer requirements. That way we're not infringing on playgrounds and pools and sheds and stuff. Eliminate that so there's no worry with code enforcement having to regulate that. I guess that'd be my legal question. And then the second one is to eliminate landscape buffers, and then 2 canopy trees followed by 20 hedges per unit. So a total of 4 canopy trees and 40 hedges and or flowering plants.
I'm assuming that's a reasonable number. Okay, all right. Staff, is that something we could live with?
So I guess I
If
want to
we
wait. for-
specify?
Yeah, we're satisfied. We just want to, when we hear the motion, we'll just ask for clarification.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you getting up again. Clear as mud. Who wants to? You go dig
I
into
can make
it.
the motion.
All right, go ahead.
Reference to variance request number 17-2022, 2535 Mary Lane. Variance to section 30-332, 20-foot side yard landscape, 20-foot front yard and rear yard landscape buffers to be eliminated under the following conditions: 2 overstory canopy trees and 20 hedges or flowering plants per unit shall be installed. That's,
Did you say
Friendly
2?
amendment would be 1 in the front, 1 tree in the front, 1
Okay.
tree in the back.
The other two.
true. Yes,
I'm sorry, did you say 2 understory trees?
overstory.
Overstory, excuse me.
one in the front, one in the back,
Per unit.
per unit.
Plus the number of shrubs.
20 hedges or flowering plants per unit.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion or anyone not understand what the motion is? All right. All right.
Could I just ask staff, I assume that vegetation would have to be in at what point in the permitting process?
With the site development permit, they'll provide to us a landscape plan for review, and then that will be, if it's approved, it'll be approved with the site plan. And so when it
I'm
goes,
talking about the installation of the landscape.
the installation, so once the site plan is approved, the next step is that they'll get a site development permit. And so they'll install that, be allowed to go ahead and do construction and install the landscaping, and it'll be verified with our
So it'll be
inspectors.
prior to CO.
Yes, all of that's prior to CO, everything's prior to that.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, we've had a motion, we've had a second. May we have roll call, please?
Vice Chairman Smith Rodriguez,
Yes.
Member Beckles,
Yes.
Member Wheelis,
Yes,
Alternate Member Van Zildjian,
Yes.
Chairman Taylor.
Yes. Congratulations. All right. So, I think that wraps us up. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing some more properties here. Where am I back to? I don't even remember.
If I may, since you're on a roll of asking city council to amend the code, I would say recommend including this one maybe.
Well, hey. Oh, okay.
Well,
Mr.
oh, I
Chairman.
guess we're not there. I'll let you finish your agenda.
Okay, yes, sir.
The, applying an administrative waiver or allowing an administrative waiver to be applied to, I think each one of these cases tonight might go a long way towards smoothing the process. That's just,
We've had to process a few duplexes through this same issue. Some of them have been able to adhere to the code. We've been able to work with them based on the parameters within the code in order to meet that. They had larger lots too, and they didn't have some of the encumbrances or the issues on their lots as this particular one did. But yes, it is. I mean, it does seem to be pretty stringent that we would require a 20-foot landscape yard even for a duplex infill development. So it certainly is an opportunity to maybe find some way to allow for some flexibility. And you have that right to ask city council to consider that.
that's, at some point, and I don't know when, but previously, 1 and 2 family developments were essentially the same process and the same requirements. At what point did they change? That's, because that's what's brought the problem to a head with these infill building permits.
So are you referring to infill developments, some vacant lots, and then someone wanted to put a duplex or a single-family home on it?
Well, historically, 1 and 2 family dwelling units were basically in the same category as far as the site development.
Right, so you do a subdivision. If you do a subdivision, whether it's a platted single-family lots or a subdivision of duplexes or a subdivision of townhomes, there's going to be right now for the project itself, a 20-foot landscape buffer requirement. Unfortunately, you get some of these individual infill lots that have been vacant for several decades, that code requirement applies because they're coming in to do that. We couldn't find an exception for this particular scenario.
Is our board, I can't remember, are we submitting a report or we approve a report that's generated to submit to city council every 6 months?
You do a semi-annual report to city council every 6 months, but you can make a recommendation to them at any time.
Well, and I'm not quite prepared. I mean, on the signage, I'm totally prepared to do that. But I think what might be helpful, I know when I leave here, I don't think about all of these types of variances. And then when I read the minutes, it's a refresher. But maybe at the very least, whenever we're about to submit that annual report, if that's next month or at the end of the year, if maybe the city could just remind us of those hot topics that we wanted to consider, and we could spend a little bit more time talking about what suggestions we have at that meeting, and maybe add that to the agenda.
We can do that.
So that would just be, I don't want to do it right now, obviously, but in the long run.
And typically in the past, when we've submitted that to city council, it's just gone as a report. But if you wish me or to show up at the meeting and actually emphasize those things, I think it would be a much better emphasis to the city council. Hey, they have a thought, they're really thinking, we're bringing something back to them, more than just say, okay, put it on a report, and it sits there in somebody's desk. So that is something we could do, we could add to those reports when the semi-annual report goes before the city commission. Okay, I have no problem with that. All right, I see no one else that wishes to speak tonight. You okay in the back? He's okay. All right, reports. How's next month looking so far?
You have 3 applications so far.
Oh, it's got 3. And when's the cutoff on that? It's probably tomorrow.
Probably a few days into next week.
It's 2 days into next week, okay. All right, so we'll be back again in July. All right. Does anything from council? No? Okay. Anybody, any members have anything? I have nothing for change. I'm not saying we need somebody else, so we're great. So we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.